Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Science of Winning podcast. Today, I want to talk to you about your most important asset as a CEO. Now, that's the question. What is your most important asset? Now, many CEOs, this is not a trick question. Hopefully, many of you or most of you who are listening to this answer with me. I am my biggest asset as a CEO. If that's not something you said, I truly want you to pay attention to this episode because I want to focus on 5 particular things in terms of how do you make yourself your biggest asset. Just like anything else in life, the first place to start is who you are being. So there's an old ancient model, which we call the be, do, have model, which is based on who you are being determines what you are doing, which then determines what you have or do not have in life. And the vast majority of CEOs focus on the doing or the having. In fact, many CEOs focus on the having. A number of high-performing CEOs focus on the doing. And then there's a fraction of the CEOs that focus on the being. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Because by shifting who you are being, you not only keep yourself as an asset, you grow yourself as an asset. And this is extremely important. And there's 5 particular things that I would ask you to take a look at when it comes to being your biggest asset. The first one is respect for yourself as an asset. Many people, particularly when we talk about this concept of servant leadership, do not give themselves enough credit for being their biggest asset. It's okay for you to acknowledge and respect yourself as your biggest asset. That doesn't mean you have an overinflated ego. That doesn't mean you're not being humble, okay? But acknowledging yourself as a CEO is giving yourself or acknowledging yourself as your best and biggest and highest value asset as a CEO. You are giving yourself respect. So that's the first part. The second part is you want to be your biggest cheerleader. Okay, you want to be your biggest cheerleader. What anybody else really thinks of you, aside from having a team that believes in your vision, really doesn't matter. It's very easy for people on social media or whatever it may be in the public to put you down, to not like you. And that is going to happen the more successful you become as a CEO. But you have to be your biggest cheerleader through not only the good times, but most importantly, the toughest times. Many CEOs are the toughest on themselves. And there's nothing wrong with being tough on yourself as long as you're not putting yourself down, as long as you're not weighing yourself down with either guilt or shame or what we call these disempowering emotions. There's nothing wrong with being tough and being self-critical from a constructive perspective, but it's the emotions that are tied to that. You want to tie empowering emotions and be your biggest cheerleader. The third, and one of the most important things that, for example, that I do is invest in yourself. Invest in yourself as a human being. Invest in yourself as a CEO. That is the best thing you can do. Many of the CEOs, and this is one of my biggest beefs with Canadian CEOs in particular, and I'm calling many of you out. You don't invest in yourself enough. This is the one thing where I give the CEOs in the US much more credit for, is that they invest in themselves. They see themselves as an asset. And so go out there, invest in yourself, learn, grow, invest money in yourself. It's the best thing that you can do by growing your skill set, by putting yourself in tough situations, by expanding who you are. You become your most important asset that keeps that competitive edge. And that leads to the fourth element, which is caring for yourself and nurturing yourself. If you had a very important asset, okay, whatever it may be, let's just say you have this coin collection that's worth millions and millions and millions of dollars, but has to be maintained in mint condition, right? Those coins have to be maintained in mint condition. You are going to take care of those coins. You're going to make sure that they're protected. You're going to make sure that they're cleaned, whatever it might be. You're going to nurture and care for them. That's what you're going to do. Or whether you have a favorite plant or an animal or a pet, you're going to pay attention to that. You're going to nurture that. How much nurturing do you do for yourself? How much caring do you do for yourself? It's very important. Neglecting yourself as a CEO is not going to allow you to perform at your highest level and be your biggest asset. And the fifth element is strategize. Strategize about yourself. How are you going to keep your competitive advantage as yourself? Okay, so as a CEO, we do strategy for business. But what's your strategy for yourself? How are you going to maintain those skill sets? How are you going to grow those skill sets? What are you going to do differently going forward as times change? To keep yourself your most important asset. So that's the fifth element. So let me just wrap this up very quick here. You want to be your biggest asset because you are. You can't get away from that. That is just the fundamental principle of being a human being, of being a CEO. You are your biggest asset. And within that, focus on these 5 things, which is respect for yourself, be your biggest cheerleader, invest in yourself, nurture and care for yourself, and ultimately strategize to keep yourself your biggest asset. If you do that, you will be a high-performing CEO, and not just high-performing CEO, a high-performing person. You're going to be a high-performing partner in life, a spouse, a parent. That's all going to be part of investing in yourself. The best thing that I ever did in my life, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, the amount of money that I've invested in myself, the amount of care that I've put in myself to make sure that I am my biggest asset, has allowed me to be able to be where I am today. And that's the same thing for you. If you do those 5 things, if you invest in yourself, you are going to be that amazing asset that's going to keep you moving forward in life.